A very good morning, Minister Grace Fu, Minister for Sustainability and the Environment, and Minister in charge of Trade Relations, Mr. Teo Ser Luck, FCA Singapore and President of the Institute of Singapore Chartered Accountants, Mr. Kok Ping Soon, Chief Executive Officer of the Singapore Business Federation, and Ms. Fan Koh, Chief Executive Officer of ISCA. Panelists and distinguished guests, on behalf of ISCA and SBF, a very warm welcome to today's dialogue titled Navigating Climate and Businesses in 2024. My name is Anil, and I'm from the ESG Coordination Office at SBF, and I'll be your MC for this event. We are a new business unit set up by SBF to support businesses, the business community in understanding ESG issues, sharing of best practices, and identifying opportunities for cross-sector partnerships. Today's session is comprised of two main segments, a panel discussion and a fireside chat, both of which promise to yield enlightening discussion topics. In the first panel discussion, we will delve into some of the highlights of COP28 and Budget 2024, as well as their impact on Singapore's ever-evolving business landscape. In the subsequent fireside chat, we will also explore the relevance of sustainable finance to C-suite leaders, uncovering how strategic and financial decisions by businesses can result in far-reaching environmental and social impact. For both the panel discussion and fireside chat, our panelists will start off with some preliminary questions, after which we welcome members of the audience to raise questions for them to address and discuss further. To kick off this morning's session, may I invite Mr. Teo Ser Luck, FCA Singapore and President of the Institute of Singapore Chartered Accountants to deliver the opening remarks. Mr. Teo, please. Mr. Teo, would you like to speak from here? Okay.
Good morning, everyone, and also audience from the online, those who log in online. There's quite a lot of you watching this. I'm very happy about this because this is the first joint event between Singapore Business Federation and ISCA. It's actually our privilege to be able to organize something with them. It's also our honor to have Mr. Grace Fu to actually grace this whole event, the first one. And for such an important topic, sustainability. And as I also is in the business community and pretty active in that with the different boards, this has become an agenda item for every discussion that we have. And I think a lot of companies are still trying to figure out how and what to do. And I think so far, the progress that we have made, thanks to the government, thanks to the ministry, thanks to Minister Grace and all, and also the government agencies and industry bodies, I think we have attained one of the highest standards in the world for disclosure, for due diligence and reporting. This is no mean feat. This takes industry effort. And I think I'm very glad that ISCA is actually playing a part. We are the de facto sustainability training provider, or we'll get our professional services ready for due diligence and reporting, and that's an important aspect for every company. And I hope that in the near future, we have all the international agencies for sustainability and ESG related to set up their base in Singapore. And we hope that the first one will very much realize very soon. And I think for all of us, Singapore can be the hub for sustainability, due diligence, reporting, disclosure, governance, and all of it together. It's such an important topic that we can't do without. And for Singapore being a regional base, I think we're most equipped to be able to do so. So hopefully with the partnership between the government and the industry bodies, we can attain to that international level. As it is, ISCA, we set up overseas chapters, about 12 of them now. And we have started to set up learning centers. These learning centers rolled out some of the courses that we do. For example, the directorship, Singapore Chartered Accountancy qualification exams, and several other business courses. But one of the things that came out all the time in the discussion was, what do you do with your sustainability training? And I think that's so important. That reflects the regional focus too. So this topic is not just another by topic or by the way, any other business kind of discussion, but it's becoming the main agenda item. So let's look at this as an opportunity. It's never a challenge. It's good for industry body as well. Every businesses, when you set up, it's not just for commercial purposes. A lot got to do with the social impact and the social objective. So hopefully all of us, all stakeholders work together and will make this whole economy and the world a better place to be through our businesses, through good professional advice and services. Thank you. So this is a welcome. Just I can't talk for too long, I'll take the whole day, and I'll let the program get started. Thank you very much, Minister Grace, and hope that all of you have a good dialogue and have your questions coming so that we can all understand better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teo, for that welcome address. Ladies and gentlemen, for today's first panel discussion on the implications of COP28 and Budget 2024 for the business community, we are fortunate to have with us three esteemed panelists. First of all, Minister Grace Fu, Minister for Sustainability and the Environment and Minister in charge of Trade Relations. We have Professor Winston Chow, Professor of Urban Climate and Lee Kong Chien Research Fellow at the Singapore Management University's College of Integrative Studies, and Dr. Vicky Bangu, President of Rolls-Royce, Southeast Asia, the Pacific, and South Korea. The panel will be moderated by Ms. Fang Yu Lin, Sustainability and Climate Change Leader at PwC Singapore. Can we just welcome them up on stage, please? And on that note, I hand over the time to our moderator to take us through the first discussion. Yu Lin, please.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome everyone to this very special partnership event with ISCA and also SPF. My name is Yulin, and I will be the moderator for today's session. And very thankful as well to SGX, for giving us this space as well to come here. Today, as just mentioned before, we have three special guests who know very much about the climate change and sustainability area. But I want to mention them again because they come from a perspective or different perspective in different quarters to this very complex issue. So Minister Grace Fu, Minister for Sustainability and Environment, who can also discuss on the global stage in terms of her insights and also observations from the recently concluded COP28 and also the recently concluded Singapore budget as well. And of course, Professor Winston Chow, he is actually the IPCC co-chair of Working Group 2. So he can talk through from an academic side and also from a scientific point of view as well. And Dr. Vicky Bangu, he's also the GCNS chair actually, and also the Rolls-Royce regional president who can talk confidently about the issues with regards to business side, but because they are also a very large procurer, what does that mean as well, from a procurement perspective too. I am very sure that we would also hear their very candid views and also personal stories as well. I'm really looking forward to it. Just now, as Select said, we have a full house here today, but we also have about 1,000 online. So the spillover effect is real, right? So it's actually quite very interested to hear about this topic. The audience here, I would strongly encourage you to ask your frank questions on this topic because it's just so much to do and it's also very highly complex. So ask frank questions to the panel here as well. But specifically, our discussions here today will be about COP28 and also the Singapore budget. In my view, they are also pretty interrelated as well. When I was preparing for this, I was actually reflecting that actually there has been quite a lot of momentum, and just now in our small group we were talking, there's just so much momentum happening for the past 5 years. And I just noted a few here as I was preparing for it. In COP21 in 2015, there was the Paris Agreement was signed, that the UN SDGs as well was also adopted by all United Nations members in 2015. You have the GFANZ, or the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero from the financial sector perspective. And in Singapore, the Singapore Green Plan, the Singapore Green Finance Action Plan, the Singapore Green Skills Committee, Singapore Carbon Tax, Enterprise Sustainability Program, and Singapore SSFA. We have also the IPCC chair as well here, and we have all the SPF and ISCA initiatives as well. And also more recently, the ACRA SGX RECCO, SRAC finalization, and we also have the $5 billion Future Energy Fund, and the list goes on, right? So have we done a lot in the past 5 years? I think so, but this is not the end. And we want to talk about things which can take, while this is momentum, we want to take progress step by step and year by year as well. And on that note, if I may, invite Minister with some of her opening comments on the, what she saw in COP28 and also the Singapore budget, and then we'll segue into the panel discussion. Minister, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and those online as well. COP28, I think, has been as successful as we can expect. First, it's located in Middle East. Basically, it's a very large petrochemical and also in oil and gas countries. And it has achieved several important milestones. First, it's really about what's happening in the negotiation part of UNFCCC. We have a first global stocktake. I'll go into implications of that in a while. But we'll also have several very important agreements. First of all, I think loss and damage. On the very first day, the presidency basically had the gavel and said, okay, this is it, this is done. And that actually sets the whole cooperative mood in the room. Because the participants, the countries realize that this is a presidency that meant business, that want to get things done and delivered on the very first day. This is very unusual because most of the time you look at the 2 weeks of COP discussion, first week, actually most of the negotiators are not even there. Like myself, I'm not even there because no one can actually spare 2 full weeks, not no one, but not many people can spare 2 full weeks just dedicating yourself, in the meeting. So most of the ministers, the negotiating ministers, are there really towards the second half. But yet, in the very first meeting of that first day, you had a decision on loss and damage. And that basically signifies the kind of energy and the kind of commitment the presidency has put into that. And the team did not fail to, impress us. And so that's the first thing. Second thing, we have also a decision on global stocktake. This is really a midpoint between 2015 or Paris Agreement and 2030, where it's an important milestone for all of us. What is significant in the global stocktake is that the IPCC statistics, science, and also conclusion from reaching 1.5 degree, keeping 1.5 degree alive, being incorporated into this document that all the parties agree to. In the past, Paris Agreement, 1.55 is a goal that we should reach. Global stocktake basically says that this is the goal that we're trying to reach, and we all agree that this is the goal that we'll try to reach, and we have specific recommendations on transition. So it's really a step towards just saying that, all the parties should aim for this goal too. All the parties should do this on mitigation particularly. We need to transit energy sector. So it's the first time we mentioned about transitioning away from fossil. No mean feat, staying this in UAE, surrounded by countries that, it's producing oil and gas. Second point is about how to get there. It even mentioned how to get there. It's talking about tripling of renewable energy, doubling of energy efficiency improvements, also talking about recognizing some of these low carbon technologies. Now, this is one negotiation feat because the advanced countries, the Europeans and so on, have been a while saying that, let's not talk about hydrogen because these are high cost technologies. Let's just focus on mitigation, just look at transition. But actually, this is a time when some of these technologies get included in mentioning, including nuclear, which has been actually kept out for a long time. Third part, it's really about mentioning how we'll get there on mobility, on transportation, on agriculture. The next NDCs that's going to come out, countries have agreed to include all sectors, all greenhouse gases. Now, this to many that is not in the negotiation may seem that, hey, what's the big deal? But it is a very big deal because since Paris, it has always taken the position that, you go at your own pace. You go at your own pace, particularly for developing countries. You need to be resourced, you need to get ready. But this is one GST, global stocktake, when we say actually everyone should try to get your NDCs, your national goals, nationally determined contributions to include all sectors and all guesses. What's the big catch here from a environmental and sustainability practitioner point of view? The big catch is actually agriculture. It's about oil and gas that's emitting methane. So these two are important sort of exclusion. Now it's almost like, it's agreed by all that we need to include these two sectors at least into your NDCs. NDCs is still nationally determined, it's still taken into national context, but there is a recognition that we need to move to include all sectors, all greenhouse gases. To me, that's a big win because we have seen how GHG in agriculture, which is quite an important sector, particularly in some parts of the world, that has not been included. And we need all sectors really to start thinking about their greenhouse gas emission. Of course, this is also a COP that actually started working on adaptation. Adaptation has always been sort of lagging behind because it's complex. Unlike mitigation, when you have a single number, 1.5 degree or 2 degree, adaptation, what is it? There's actually not an agreed single parameter. But this COP, we basically agreed that there's a certain framework, and we've agreed on the important elements of framework. Why is it important for us, businesses? It means that countries will have to start preparing national adaptation plan. And when they start doing that, there will be considerations about how does this impact me? How do I measure? What do I need to do? What are the services that needs to be there? And how can I start doing it? So it's all about thinking about your infrastructure. We're thinking about downstream effect. It's more demand for consultancy, more demand for engineering services, more demand for, estimation, more demand for budgets. So there are all these sort of downstream effects that businesses may be interested in. This COP also talked about finance, and although finance is always difficult, right? This 100B item that has been outstanding for many, many years. Finally, I think the developed countries, the countries that have pledged, they all promised that they have delivered their part. But importantly, it's happening outside negotiation. So I'll move out from the negotiation room now to what is outside the negotiation. Since I think COP26 Glasgow, we have seen this part to be actually providing a lot of the energy and a lot of resourcing. The finance sectors has really come in, and we see that in this particular COP, Singapore has really, put its mark. We have announced FAST-P, which is really a launch of capital from the government, capital from a few key investors to activate blended finance up to $5 billion. And very shortly, how do we do that, right? I mean, you say, okay, what is blended finance? Why is it important? It's important because when we think about renewable energy, how do you triple renewable energy? And then how do you mitigate? You must first invest in renewable energy sources, maybe solar panel, maybe hydro, maybe alternatives, thermal, and so on. But you need a replacement, right? Because if you're just increasing renewable without displacing fossil, you're not getting the switch. But if you look at Southeast Asia, particularly, coal-fired power plants is still very much a topic that we need to discuss because there are many young coal-fired power plants, CFPP, in the region. So if you're just investing capacity, but without bringing down this capacity, we estimated that just the emission from the CFPP around the world will use up 2/3 of the budget that we have for the remaining 2 decades or so. In other words, don't talk about growth. Don't talk about new businesses. Just the CFPP will already use up 2/3. So if you're really serious about bending the curve on climate, we need to do something about the coal-fired power plants. That's something that's recognized in the global stocktake. That's where transition finance have to come in. So very important for transition, and we can talk about that later on if you're interested. But this COP, lots of detail that can be, figure out and discuss later on. And what does that mean to Singapore? And we have the budget this year to support the transition. And we can, again, also discuss how we can go about doing that later. I will just stop here because otherwise I can take up the whole time. An hour. Thank you.
No, I think that was super helpful. And if I were to just kind of like summarize that, right, it would be a bit more about really, how do I, operationalize all this, right? We talked a lot about climate change. We agree this is an issue. We commit to it in terms of our NDCs, etc. But now it's about solutioning, operationalization, making sure we're getting the details right. Minister, you talked about, the bunch of accountants in this room, right? We love completeness, There's always, this one not accounted for, no, but again, so that one I think is important, right? From completeness perspective, because, climate change doesn't, kind of like ignore some of the other greenhouse gas emissions, right? They include it, right, as part of their overall emissions. And also its other GHG equivalents as well. And you talked about other kind of more important issues or so, like adaptation, and also how complex it is in Asia also. So Asia...
I will jump in now. I can't miss this opportunity. It's not for completeness that we want GHG from agriculture to come in, at least not from my perspective. I want that to be included because if we do not have sustainable agriculture, we don't get food. We don't get food for the long term. If we continue to have agriculture done the way that we're doing now, it's not sustainable. We're going to cut a lot more trees and we're going to be subject to the vagaries of the climate. And 30 years down the road, we are going to, basically it's in the cycle, right? We are cutting down trees so that we can have more food, and then we still continue to grow the way that we are growing. We need to cut down more, and that itself is causing global warming to worsen. So agriculture itself has everything to do with our well-being. It's not just about completeness. We are hoping that by including in that, countries that are producing food in a very big way will start to measure their agriculture sector contribution to food. And if we have an adaptation plan, we talked about adaptation, they will start thinking about how do I have agriculture adapted to warming temperature, droughts, more unpredictable rainfall. That's adaptation. Ultimately, it is really about you and I. Do we get stable food produced for ourselves and for future generations? That's really how it gets into this consideration. Everything that we do, at least Singapore does, in climate negotiation is not just for completeness of an IPCC report. The IPCC report and what we are doing actually is reinforcing, ultimately is about a more sustainable future, and we are doing the prep work for our kids in 20, 30 years' time, so that they don't have to be facing all this, calamities from weather that wipes out, the food from farmers in Pakistan or India. We are trying to move everybody to a more sustainable future. Sorry about that.
No, I agree. No, but I think, Minister had a very important role at COP, right? Being the co-negotiator for the mitigation track in other areas as well. So these kind of decisions, I think, are so important. And from just what she's shared, right, it really isn't simple, and it's got varied effects as well. So we have our work cut out for us, for those who are in sustainability, trying to fight this. Maybe if I could then now segue into this complex, these wide global governance areas, right? What does it actually mean for businesses, and what does it actually mean for businesses in Singapore? Maybe I'll just allow Minister to continue on with that, and then maybe get the other panelists, Winston and Vicky, to chime in as well. Yeah.
So I think that Yulin sort of alluded, right, that we have seen a lot of changes, and businesses are at least hopefully feeling the momentum. And I think for the accounting profession, it seems to be like, wow, a wave that's sweeping through, right? We are having more reporting requirements, and we are having really reporting deadlines ahead of us. And worse still, the standards are still there evolving. And then we need to do that because we are talking about a change, a global change in the way that we do things, the economy is structured, how we are producing our energy, how we're producing our goods in 3 decades. If you look at how we have adopted fossil, it took us more than 100 years from the moment we invented, sort of steam engine. But it's going to take us, we want to go through this decarbonization in 2 to 3 decades time. Why? Because we are already feeling the effects of climate change. On my way here, I listened to, Money Matters on the radio, and already talking about how ski resorts in the US are feeling the effect of less snow, less business. I heard that also from my counterparts in Europe. And so if you're running in a hospitality that's dependent on weather, you are already feeling the effects. If you're having a beach resort and getting the sort of onslaught of sea level rise, you are already feeling the effects. If you're in insurance, earlier I have a chat with someone, if you're in reinsurance, already you have to recalculate all your claims, and it's already here. And if we are quite silly as a human tribe not to do something about it, if you know that that's going to hit us even more if you don't do anything. So how do we move? And why do we move? You know that this is happening. You know that you need to do something, right? Do you want to wait and be sweat and say, just wait on, hold on. Let's see who else is doing, who else is doing and how fast they're moving before we start? Or do we say, hey, we need to do this anyway? So might as well make full use of the opportunities that come our way. Be an early starter. We may not be taking the lead. We may not be number 1 pole, but we may want to just follow quite closely behind, right? And we see this really as an extremely important, once-a-lifetime opportunity ahead of us. Just talk about what ISCA is doing and what, Salak has just mentioned earlier. There is a real need for sustainability reporting, assurance, verification. It's happening because companies, industries, globally industries are moving in that direction. It's also happening because of other instruments that's happening. Green financing is happening. Carbon credits is happening. So these require reporting, measurement, assurance, and verification. Do you want Singapore to be really ready to be the hub where knowledge is accumulated, is grown, where skill sets are sprouted, where people will come here to be the knowledge hub? And we say yes. How often do you find this sort of it's a once in a lifetime opportunity? So make full use of this, and then the government see that, and the government really wants to be helping industry. That's the reason why we're putting in carbon tax. That's the reason why we're putting in reporting requirements. That's the reason why MAS is really breathing down the necks of our banks. Do you want to struggle with stranded assets 10, 20 years later? Or do you want to lead in the process of greening your books? I mean, that's the kind of simple choices we have, right? So I just want to say that budget this year got to be read together with budget last year and the year before, but the whole series of things that we're doing with the Green Plan, it's really about getting economy ready. More importantly, it's about the green economy that's ahead of us. So let's grasp this opportunity and be that leader, the leader in this, so that it really be not just cost of restructuring, but rather growing new knowledge, growing new value proposition. And it's really my wish that all the accounting professions are able to get value add, increase your fees. Make it attractive to young professionals to want to be part of this change, to see that there's great opportunity, great prospects ahead of you. I'll go into the detail later.
So Minister, I just wanted to just embellish what you've also just said, right? I mean, firstly, from a youth perspective, Maria over there, who sits on the Sustainability Committee, she's really engaging quite a fair bit of the youth in the IHLs from the accountancy profession, to see whether or not they'll be interested in sustainability as well. I wanted to also just share a bit more of some, some stories that I've heard also. I recently met one very, not big company, quite small, maybe not even medium-sized, and they're in the resources industry. Then they told me that, I just came back from UN, United Nations. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. They said that because they from the CBAM perspective, right, they needed their supply chains to be enhanced. But they said, this is second generation. I said, I need to do it anyway, so I'm just going to do it to the best of my ability, right? It was very, very difficult, but eventually they were awarded by all the MNCs. Okay, so I was like, wow, kudos to them and really, really well done. On the flip side of things, I've also noticed larger companies not taking maybe earlier action. And, more recently, I saw one company which we actually knew, what were the transition risks as well. But unfortunately, some of the customers had actually pulled out. So that, you can see here that going in a little bit earlier, has its advantages, even for the smaller companies. And also, even if you're in a position of comfortableness, right, it can also very easily impact you as well. So, but maybe now I go to the scientist. Winston, from your point of view, your scientific view, and what you've heard from COP, what do you think, how do you think that relates to businesses?
Well, thanks, Yulin, and thanks, Minister, for setting the stage so clearly and articulating the importance of what we're doing and what you did as well in Dubai in trying to negotiate the best outcomes, not just for Singapore, but for the rest of the world, for many things, from Article 6 to the global goal on adaptation to the stocktake, etc., etc. It's a very formidable task, and glad that you led the way in that. That was important. But from what Minister said, so my role in COP was as the co-chair of the IPCC's Working Group 2 on impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability. What I do is, together with my partner in crime, Professor Bart van den Hurk from the Netherlands, we try and organize the world's best, foremost scientists involved in reducing climate risk, involved in reducing vulnerabilities of, food insecurities, like what you talked about that regions and countries face over the next 6 years or so. And we've been advised by governments in the COP to try and develop indices, develop metrics to help with that global goal of adaptation that Minister was talking about. It's a very difficult process because local vulnerabilities sometimes means different things to different regions and peoples and different businesses. So it's quite a difficult task to develop that together with the special report on climate change and cities. Whatever happens in cities doesn't stay in cities anymore. That's one of the things that, in the business community in Singapore has realized. There is an outsized influence of what we do within our 750 square kilometers that has massive benefits in terms of climate action outside of this region, and how this sort of role that we play is something, and is an exemplar for other city-states and other cities who realize that even though cities only cover 3% of the world's surface, we are responsible for about 68 to about 72% of the world's emissions. And the actions we take here go a long way towards successful climate action. So we're trying to develop that report over the next 2.5 years, and very grateful for the support for the ministry in trying to lead the IPCC for this report, but also I'm very grateful for the support from academics in Singapore and the region, and particularly the business community, the private sector here. One of the things that we want to do for this coming report is make it accessible, not just for policymakers, but for the broader community, because science should not just dictate the actions at government negotiations. It should not be the basis of lessons for the next generation of academics and business leaders, but it's also important information for the business community. What you can do, as long as it's aligned with the science-based principles of climate action, it will make a difference. So that's one thing I will conclude on, but I want to bring that in first. One other thing I also noted from COP was that sense of urgency from every stakeholder. It wasn't just the negotiators that I was trying to advise in order to say, this is what we can do to keep to a 1.5 degree C world over the next, over this coming decade of climate action. But tellingly, outside the negotiation halls, there was so much activity from the private sector. There was so much activity from engagement between businesses who realized, hey, we are here, we need to have a good first mover advantage. For instance, the tripling of renewable energy capacity. Within hours of the announcement, there was so much activity from businesses realizing this is an opportunity to contribute towards that 1.5 degree C goal that governments have tried to agree upon from Paris until Dubai and beyond. That energy also, that energy permeates throughout the entire ecosystem that I've engaged with. It's not just the private sector, it's also the regulators, the legal fraternity, students who I teach at SMU who realize, hey, if we study and get a handle on sustainability, we can have, we can actually dedicate our idealism in terms of a sustainable world that, let's be frank, they will be living with the consequences of a 1.5 or 2 degree C world in the future, and they want to have, some sort of agency to do so. So they want to contribute as well. So what I hope will happen is that in the IPCC's last report, we prescribed a sort of pathway that governments, countries, cities can follow. It's called climate resilient development. How we combine the best actions of adaptation and mitigation together. We protect ourselves from climate vulnerability, but we also reduce our emissions and actions that lead to climate change as best as we can. But we bring in the sustainable development goals that Yulin brought up, occur at the same time in the Paris Agreement. You combine those in together, and then good things will happen. So good actions like, it's not just the sort of targeted emissions reductions from a governmental perspective that Singapore has been good at, but also actions that develop the knowledge capital basis. Like in the last budget, the importance of expanding skills future. One of the things that we pointed out is that as we move to a green economy, every country wants to do that in a sustainable way. You cannot afford to leave people behind. How you retrain people who might lose out from the older brown economy and bring them into the fold for green economy is massively understated, underrated, but it contributes to climate action. It's based on sound science. So that urgency that was very palpable in COP, my hope is that it continues on over the next 6 years because we don't have that much time up to 2030. So I'll pause here because I think Vicky will also have other things, important things to contribute. And also don't forget the next panel, and in terms of climate finance, talking about the tactics, the sort of important things to put the meat onto the framework that the governments and the scientists that we have tried to put into play at COP and in the IPCC reports. That is very critical.
How about Vicky, your views on impacts on business from the COP perspective? Yeah.
Thank you. I'll jump in here. When we look at the outcomes of COP28, the signals were confirmation and amplification. Amplification from the lens that renewable energy capacity is going to increase by 3-folds by 2030. This is going to create new business opportunities. It's going to look at availability. It's going to look at energy security. It's going to look at the pricing strategies. And that's why there is a lot of commotion after the announcement on how renewable energy and new sort of business ventures are starting to think about this. There was confirmation in energy efficiency of existing systems and processes and how technology will play a key part to that. If you look at unabated coal power plants today, whilst there's a focus to reduce them, there's also an opportunity for how do we put carbon capture on the back of that so that we can transition them out and phase them out in a safe way. So that carbon capture opportunity becomes really significant. And a lot of that research is being done here in Singapore. There was also confirmation on the pathway to net zero, the energy transition by 2050, confirmation that governments globally are still committed, confirmation that industries are really including this as part of their granular strategy on how they're going to be sort of executing that path. And again, For many industries, technology exists and technology will play a key role. Low emission technologies such as hydrogen, which is being currently explored, needs a lot of emphasis on how are we going to not just manufacture it, but do it cost effectively. But how are you going to store the logistics, the transportation, all of that still needs to be considered and work needs to be done there. But there are other technologies that are already available today. Nuclear has been around for a very long time. Small modular reactor is another enabling way where you can have isolated, available, secure energy supply. And these nuclear reactors, the one that, for example, my company works on, has been around for 60 years because it's the same nuclear reactor from a submarine that we're putting into a land-based system. So there's good track records of the available technologies that we have and how do we take them to the market. There was focus on and confirmation on reducing CO2 emissions and NOx emissions. Many of the industries, if I look at aviation, for example, is already focused on and regulatory encourages that sort of transition as well, is to reduce the NOx, reduce the SOx emissions, reduce the fuel consumptions, and reduce the emissions and noise. So a lot of these parameters are already being invested into the industrial strategy. I want to start thinking about how does this really link with Singapore? And so when I look at the output of the COP28 from confirmation and amplification, what we see in the business and our business community with the SPF is assurance on how the Singapore budget has been delivered, assurance on mitigating the increasing business costs. This is a considerable factor for us where we can now tap into the 1.3 billion of the enterprise support package, the tax rebate, the other sort of factors that are there for the SMEs to give them the cash boost to be able to be a part of this ecosystem. And we've got to think about SMEs really considerably here because it can't just be focused that MNCs will be the solution providers. We've got to bring SMEs into this conversation. We've got to engage them. How do they tap into this budget? How do they tap into these technologies? How do they understand the regulatory framework? How will they be positioned in the future to be able to be successful as they are today? So that part becomes really, really important. You mentioned a little bit on people as well, and I think we have to focus a lot on the skills for the future. The skills that we'll need for tomorrow's industries, especially when many are already including sustainability as part of their business and granular strategy, will become significant here in Singapore as well. So the extension of the Skills Future Enterprise, the expansion of the energy efficiency grant, which includes manufacturing, includes maritime, are great signals. That assurance part of the Singapore budget that links with the COP28. But one last point that I would like to make here is we've got to think about the global landscape. It's very easy for us to just look at Singapore and say the things that we're going to be progressing at whilst our neighbors are sort of progressing at a different pace. We've got to bring our regional landscape together with us. The attractiveness of Singapore is because of Singapore and the region. And we've got to make sure that the foreign direct investments that continues to come into this part of the world takes that consideration as a whole. So I'm excited to see and more conversations that are happening on how Singapore is going to start partnering more with the region and bring them along this journey as well.
Very, very insightful comments, from the panelists. I just maybe want to just summarize that, right? I think Minister said, don't wait, that we are primed for opportunities. There's some examples on that as well. Winston said, use science to help to inform you what you should do. And on that point, I will also say that I have also seen companies, where they think that, okay, climate risk, let's say, for example, shortage in water will only occur at this particular time. They were wrong, okay? It occurred earlier. So actually this is real from a risk perspective. And I think Vicky said that the technology is already here, but we need to make sure that this is also, we need to bring along the SMEs, but we need to also take note of the global landscape. I just came back from London and also, just came back from Amsterdam. And, my own point of view is that sustainability is not something you just say, right? How do you tell whether or not a country has a sustainability culture? You can see it in the everything around you, in terms of the transportation that they have, in terms of what they put on the billboards, the conferences that they hold, etc., the attitudes of the people. So I think, sustainability is not what's said, but actually what you can see around you. So I think from a global perspective, they're really picking up as well, and we are very primed for this in Singapore as well. And Vicky mentioned that the Singapore budget, does give, quite a fair bit of assurance on that. It is for us to, I guess, utilize it as well. I want to just broaden the topic, but by the way, the QR code is here. Please feel free to ask questions as well. And I see the questions coming through. I'm going to get to that, in a short bit, right? But I wanted to maybe just ask the panelists as well, as we transition to a green economy, right? And you've spoken somewhat about it as well. It is not going to be a smooth ride. There are going to be opportunities, of course, but also risks. There's one of the questions here as well, which touched about trade-offs, and that maybe is part of that risk as well. So how do we kind of deal with some of the opportunities? Maybe I can start with Vicky, and also some of the risks, which is that kind of trade-off. For accountants here, we will do our cost-benefit analysis and marginal abatement cost curves, but how do you see that? Yeah.
If I look at datum of today, we've got the financials, we've got the incentives, we've got the government support, we've got technology, and we've got regulatory moving in the right direction. And I think that's important for us to realize. A really hard industry to tackle is the aviation industry. It's the one that I'm very closest to. But yet in the very successful Singapore Air Show, Singapore put forward a position on sustainable aviation fuel through the regulatory lens on how blended fuel and a percentage of sustainable aviation fuel will be part of the mix. We know that at the moment it's very expensive to produce sustainable aviation fuel, and it's we haven't got the right scales or the economics in place. But we've got to put the right incentives together with the policies that drives that forward direction. And I think that's a great opportunity for us, so that new business opportunities that will come out from aligning between the finance, the technologies, and the regulatories. The connectivity with the region for us is really, really important, and I think that's a great opportunity I shared just a few minutes ago. But the part that I think that we need to be mindful of on the risk side is the supply chain readiness. We're seeing many advances that are progressing from tier 1 and tier 2 companies. A lot of the efforts by SBF and the GCNS is really engaging with the SMEs, engaging deeply on how do we make sure that there's awareness of the landscape of sustainability and the regulatory and the technologies that are available that they can tap into. And we've got to bring more and more of that connectivity, engaging the trade associations that are so visible and connected with many of the companies that are here in Singapore, and making sure that communication gets all the way down to the SMEs. The other challenge that I think we also have and a risk is the cost of doing business is just significantly increasing. Singapore has never been a cheap place to sort of do business, but at the same time, if you do the right activities with the right partnerships, with the right sort of engagement within the ecosystem, the business case is very attractive. And it's that attractiveness that we need to make sure and we link through the trade associations, the SPF, the GCNS, that we need to do a little bit more of to make sure, especially where 99% of our companies here are SMEs, 70% of our workforce is in the SMEs, we've got to bring the whole of the nation forward. And so those two areas that I think are a risk for us, the supply chain and the cost of doing business that we need to keep in mind.
Sorry, if I may just go into that. You're saying that from a supply chain perspective, you're seeing MNCs, global businesses, even the large businesses in Singapore saying that, I really want to scrutinize my supply chain and my suppliers who supply to me. And if they're not ready, after a while, they will be, they will consider other alternatives. Is that right?
I think that's fair.
Is that a real thing, or is that a fair point? Or
many of our setups here have a global partnerships and a global trade. And companies and businesses have options. where we're trying to see, especially when it comes to long-term service or long-term agreements that you have with tier threes, they tend to be sort of, in some industries, sort of 5, 10, 15, some even 20 years. So it's very difficult for supply chains and tier threes to be able to enter new market ventures. But what is happening at the moment is there's a new metric that companies are looking at, which is a scope 3, and which is what is my carbon footprint, or what is my cost of doing business from a carbon perspective through the value chain of activities that I do. Here we have an opportunity in Singapore because it's more about just giving the incentives and the awareness to SMEs. I think we need to give them the right environment for them to be able to do the business. The environment such as if there is an industrial park, for example, that is just green energy ready. Already by engaging through that, they will be much more visible to the global opportunities. And that at the moment isn't there yet. And many other sort of countries are starting to do exactly the same, which is how do we give our SMEs the leg up, and supply chain here, having the right understanding, having the right setup, having the right strategy, having the right ecosystem, and the environment becomes really important. That gives them the leg up to be able to trade internationally.
Okay, so I think we shouldn't leave that on the table. I think it's an opportunity for SMEs, of course in Singapore, but also a region, and I'm full confidence that they can leapfrog as well to that kind of state. But maybe over to Minister and also Winston, in terms of what are the opportunities and also trade-offs during, as we transition. Yeah.
Well, I would say that, from the government's point of view, we're putting our government procurement to work. So some of you would be familiar with how we are increasingly, putting sustainability criteria in our government procurement evaluation. And also we are extending the sectors. So at MSE, we sort of lead the government procurement, green sustainability procurement efforts for the government. And we are working through the system of the public service, including state boards and agencies, to over time increase more types of procurement and also more criteria. The purpose really is to give those that have invested in green products and services a leg up. So favoring companies that started on the sustainability journey has something more sustainable to offer. And also basically using procurement to develop the market for those green products and services. Looking at different hats in MTI is that, we have applied, MSE applied carbon tax, and we have said that the carbon tax is really not a source of fiscal revenue, but really it's an incentive to encourage business sectors to decarbonize. So our tax revenue is actually going back to MTI side to incentivize, to encourage, to support businesses to go on this journey. It is happening for study. So now if you want to see how to build up the capability within your company, you have a development grant that ESG has. If you want reporting, there's also support to help you on a reporting journey. I think it's 30% for large company up to 150,000 cap. For smaller companies, 70% on reporting. There's also a green print application that's coming up to help company report. And also training, huge part of training, investments through university, through trade association, professional bodies such as ISCA to really build up the pipeline of people from various varying degree. Some needs very broad understanding, some need very deep skill sets, so they're happening at many, many levels. Ultimately, we want to really support companies to go on this journey. First, our own decarbonization journey, we need that because we need companies to reduce their carbon footprint so that as a country, we can meet our 2050 goal. Second, really as a way to encourage them to grow and to be ready for a new demand for green products and services. And this is happening across many sectors. MTI itself, We have many schemes that help company into this. For example, we have put aside $5 billion for future energy grants, right, as a fund. By the way, this is not meant to subsidize fuel. It's really to help to look at areas where we need investments for infrastructure, and therefore we want to take it off businesses and sector and have the government invest and ready. For example, we want to look at importation of renewable energy from the area. And for that to happen, you know, you need very long cables, and that's going to be expensive. If we don't have a government kind of fund ready to invest in that, it's going to spread the cost on businesses. No single business operator is going to say, hey, I'm going to be the brave one and invest in that infrastructure. So government needs to be ready with a fund. And when we have business proposals, either coming from the North, Malaysia, South, Indonesia, or even Cambodia, Vietnam, or East Malaysia coming in, we have a fund, we have the arsenal that's ready to invest in some of this infrastructure. So we are stand ready to get the economy, to get our resource, our energy onto a green energy with government support. Ultimately, it's about helping businesses to really take advantage of this opportunity. And I must say that, Yulin, you know, sometimes when we say SME, we always conjure up a certain image that they are always lagging behind. In fact, we find that SME are the ones where new technology is being honed, that there are new investors coming in, starting up, and really making use of that opportunity. So SMEs are both waiting, but at the same time, many of them are championing as well. We hope to see more coming out of universities, coming out really as a startup to help us decarbonize and help us grow. Of course, we do have the micro sort of SMEs, the mom and pops, very domestic facing kind of sectors, and that really is in energy efficiency grant. Please go and look at your, carbon footprint. Just look at your electricity if you don't even look at carbon, right? Just look at electricity and water. How do you reduce utilities? And there's grants for you to change your chiller. There's a chance to look at your refrigerator. If you have that, change it to more energy efficient one, because carbon tax is coming, right? In case you have not seen that, we have just moved from 5 to 25%. Carbon tax is such that only very few companies get a bill from the government. Only maybe a handful, less than 100, has a bill from the government called carbon tax. But the effect is coming through the utility, right? So even if you don't see a carbon tax, the effect is being felt. Please do all you can to mitigate that for your company. Tell your bosses, hey, utility is going up. It's actually more than just oil because there's a carbon tax, but there are all these grant schemes for us to adopt so that we can reduce the electricity, we can reduce the cost of utility. And in case you're wondering, there's also another $25 to $45 increase in carbon tax is coming. Whole idea is that whatever we collect, we're going to give it back to you. If you don't take it, your competitor is going to take it, right? And they're going to have the advantage of costs because they take all the grant scheme, they do all the training, they really take the buckets. We always say that when government give money, please go in buckets. Go and check out ESG, SPF, ISCA, where are all the good things, all the grant subsidy? Go and train your people, right? Because in case you haven't realized the pattern, is that after giving up the carrots a while, we're going to come in with regulations, right? We're going to say that if you still have this low efficiency, outdated equipment, we're going to say no more, right? That's how we do, right? In the business as well. In the office building, we will raise the green mark over time, right? We incentivize the front runner, and then after that, we're going to draw a line and say, okay, no more available, the others. Same with equipment. We're going to encourage you to buy all these 4 ticks. We're going to raise the tick mark, and then we're going to tick up the 1 tick, tick up the no tick ones. So if you're still importing or still using the no ticks, soon you're going to find no one able to maintain them for you. So see this as an opportunity while we are putting the incentive to go out and really grasp all the opportunities is coming your way. Lots of grant scheme.
Thanks so much, Minister. May I just, I think you summarized about, we've got the government procurement policies that are going to be enhanced, and there are lots and lots of policies that are supporting businesses here. And your point about SMEs is well taken. Maybe SMEs should not be called small, medium-sized enterprises, but sustainable and mighty enterprises. Sustainable and mighty enterprises. Okay. All right. So maybe Winston, did you want to chime in about anything, or there's a lot of like.
Shall we take the top question?
Yeah. Shall we take the? Okay.